most Americans have no clue what it takes to come to the United States, and how, if you're a poor person, there's no chance that you're ever going to be allowed in. And most of the people we work with come here out of desperation. They're not coming here because, and they can't come here legally.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Gift of Need podcast. I'm Jude DiMeglio Trang. I'm an author and observer of human need in society. And this podcast seeks to address the overlooked power of our human need and how it shapes our relationships and behavior in society as a whole. And I hope to whet your appetite and get you thinking about your needs and how they are opportunities and gifts rather than burdens. And how I do that is with amazing guests with a variety of backgrounds and talents, like the person who's joining me today. And this is Bob Ekblad with me from Burlington, which is north of Seattle in Washington. And we're going to talk about why we need compassion at the margins. Hi, Bob.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Really, I appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today. So Bob and his wife, Gracie, who couldn't be with us today, founded Tierra Nueva in Honduras in 1982, which began as a sustainable farming and preventative health program and a grassroots Bible study movement. Then in 1989, they moved to France to pursue their studies in theology. Bob and Gracie are pastors of the Tierra Nueva community and the People's Seminary up in Burlington, Washington. So, Bob, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your time in Honduras and what you witnessed actually happening during that Cold War proxy conflict, as opposed to what we back in the States saw and heard on the news.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so I first went to Central America with the objective of exposing myself to poverty and to trying to read scripture and think about my faith from a place of just being with the people who were poor and marginalized. And so the plan was to go all the way to the southern tip of South America, traveling and reading theology of the Bible. And I ended up pretty much just stopping in Guatemala. And there was a civil war going on right when I crossed the border. I mean, it had been going on for a while. And the language teachers in my language school, where I was studying 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, were all pretty much traumatized. They were university students, and a lot of their professors were being abducted and disappeared by the death squads. And part of their role was to educate anyone who was there from the West, from, North America or Europe, and about what was going on. They were in a way involved in the resistance, but clandestinely. And so when they saw that I was really open and interested, they poured out their hearts. And I began to have conversations with them about sort of what I was discovering about Jesus, being, committed to raising up, the poor, preaching good news to the poor and liberation to the oppressed and sight to the blind. And, and that was kind of all brand new to them. A lot of them had abandoned the church, mainly the Catholic Church, and were just considered themselves atheists. And so anyway, it was in that conversation with these people and just being submerged in this place where there was so much terror, because there were massacres happening, like when we were there, of whole like indigenous villages by the military. That's when I just thought, I feel called to be here. And so I ended up calling my girlfriend and asking her to marry me over the phone. And then I ended up flying up, getting married, and a week after the wedding, we came back down and both of us studied in that language school and traveled through Central America and felt this call to work with the poor. And we didn't know how we were going to do it. We didn't really have any skills. We did, but they were skills not, we didn't know anything about farming or I think we were just mainly there to learn from the people. And that was kind of the skill we were bringing is trying to be respectfully present with the people and identify what their resources were and who they were and in a way honor them. And we got recruited to teach farming with this Honduran sustainable farming project, which included the director of it finding us a peasant farmer who was a master organic intensive farmer who was who became our mentor and helped us establish a farm. And we were there with a lot of guilt for just being white Westerners from middle-class backgrounds and maybe feeling like we needed to somehow, I guess in a way atone for our guilt through service. And we had sort of this notion of Matthew 25, whatever you do to the least of these, you're doing it to Jesus. But there were so many impoverished people. And we suddenly kind of realized that we were just burning out trying to love the poor. And, and in a way, we discovered that we couldn't save ourselves through welcoming Jesus in the poor. It was just an overwhelming task. And in a way, what happened was that triggered this almost like another conversion process where we could see that God loved us even if we weren't able to really give our lives the way that we were feeling like we should. And we were maybe, so anyway, we discovered the gospel, I think, in some ways, that God loved us even if we were Americans.
I love it. Well, who can forget being a U2 fan, their songs, Bullet the Blue Sky and Mothers of the Disappeared. I mean, and their Joshua Tree album from 87, that came from Bono's trip in 85, 86 with Amnesty International. And the song critiques the U.S. military intervention, right? So my question is, how did your time in Central America influence your decisions for your future education and work and how you practiced your Christianity?
Well, what happened was, we discovered that gospel of grace, and that kind of coincided with the people asking us if we would lead them in Bible studies because a guy showed up at about one of our agricultural farming meetings wanting, who was a known murderer, and everyone was afraid. And so that kind of was a catalyst for them saying, well, can we start our farming class with a Bible study? Because a lot of us are really rough, violent people. And maybe the Bible would make us more gentle. And so it was really strange because they already knew we had a Bible study in our home at night, even though we never promoted that. And we weren't trying to, we didn't really see ourselves as pastors or even as missionaries. We saw ourselves as just trying to practice the too, considering their people's interests more important than our own, like Jesus. And so then we ended up leading Bible studies, which kind of got us into pastoral ministry because people were responding to the gospel, the radical good news of Jesus' love for sinners. And they were, and so we were involved deeper and deeper and deeper in the lives of the people. But we felt kind of like we needed more training. And we started getting accused of being communists, and there were some threats against us. They tried to burn our farm down several times. So our people were saying maybe it's a good time to leave. And so we were in our late 20s, and that's when we decided to move to France. And it was there that we had so many questions, and we were really ready to study. And so our studies were just perfect, really. It was a perfect timing to go into in-depth studies of scripture and also therapeutic psychotherapy. And it was in that process that we felt a calling to be pastors. And we went through the ordination process. And we also felt called to go back to the United States. And we've been outside the U.S. for 10 years.
Wow. Well,
and then, then we felt called from there to go to start this ministry to immigrant workers an hour north of Seattle. And
Okay,
so
so that's what I wanted to do, was fast forward now to your ministry in the Skagit Valley, which I do understand from what I've heard on your podcast and read, that it's a faith community focusing on ministry at the margins, which I do love that phrase because it gives you a good visual picture of the margins of things, the margin on the road, the margin on your document. And this is with people coming out of addiction and prison and homelessness, and also, as you said, immigrant workers who are mostly undocumented. So you refer to your faith community as a no-barrier church. So what do you mean by that, and what keeps you energized for working in such a difficult area of service?
Yeah, so when we moved up here, I was thinking I was going to be a professor of theology, but the doors just shut everywhere for me to do that full time. And the real call on our lives was to try to bring the best of sort of theological reflection to engage with people who were sort of the least in terms of having no access or little access to, to like the church and the resources of theology and such. And so I became chaplain. I got asked to be chaplain of a jail. And in that chaplaincy work, I was dealing with Mexicans in the beginning, and then I became chaplain to the whole jail. And that's where I felt like I went through almost like another whole conversion process, because I began to really learn from the stories of the people about their suffering and their deprivations. And it was just so deeply moving and affecting me that I just found myself being just pulled into people's lives. And my wife, Gracie, and I had a Bible study group for migrant farm workers every week. And then that evolved into a bilingual church. And then over the years, we've been there 32 years here. What we found is that after 32 years of doing Bible studies and pastoral care in the jail, we've been blocked from that since COVID, the last 5 years. So actually, we were more like 28 years going in every week. Now it's just speaking to people through the glass, but we kind of learned how to communicate the radical message of God's grace and love to people who feel completely disqualified. And that's what we're doing in our church. And our church is, we call it no barrier because usually that language of barriers has to do with homeless shelters and such, where people are told, look, you're welcome to come here, but you can't bring your dog. You can't bring your shopping cart with all your stuff. You can't be high under the influence of anything. Those are barriers. And so our no barriers are, you can come as you are. You can bring your pet. You can be under the influence. You don't, we just accept you the way you are. You're welcome to take communion. And so people, they're not used to that. Like, we have a big sign on our door of our church that says no judgment here. I mean, that's probably not exactly true, because people judge. We all judge each other. But we make a real effort to be a safe place for people who normally would feel like disqualified in.
Right.
So we have a Bible study every Wednesday for people, and then our Sunday service is, it's really interesting. There's just people coming every week, new people. A lot of them just have no church background at all. And they will just look at us when we're speaking and just be like, with their eyes wide open, like, wow, what? And
a different picture of what they think Christianity is. John and I go to a little church in Tucson that is very similar to this. And we have people that come in, you can tell they're right off the street and under the influence of something, alcohol or whatever, homeless, all sorts of needs. And this brings to mind when John and I were young, and I can't remember if I think it was somebody else, but people in the 70s would go into a normal church during that whole time of the Jesus movement and stuff, and they'd come in and they'd be escorted out. They had long hair. They looked like hippies. They weren't acceptable people. And to think of that, the exact, what would you call that? The opposite of how, when you think of Jesus and his guys walking around, it was, come to us as you are. This is how we offer. We accept you where you are, and we will work and encourage you to move on. So I noticed that one of your priorities is training current pastoral workers and future leaders to minister and serve people on the margins of society, because this is what you've learned and practiced here and around the globe. And you seem to be very focused on ministry to the poor and marginalized. So how does your theological training, and when you're trying to teach people the biblical mandates for serving others, how does that go? How do you go about that? Because it's a pretty unglamorous thing you're asking people to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've developed a training we call it a certificate in holistic liberation, Word, Spirit, Street, and it's 2 5-day, 5 full-day modules that involve there's 22 sessions in each module, and so we've done them in something like 24 countries, and we're doing them almost continuously. So we're heading right now to Congo and Lesotho to do modules 1 and 2 in those two places, and then we're going to be back in Cameroon in May, and Benin. We're not sure when, but we have teams of people that we've trained to teach these courses who will be doing them also in Zambia, Malawi, and in Mozambique in the next couple months. And so the challenge is that there are thousands and thousands, I mean, probably more than that, just like pastoral workers who are not trained formally, who are out there, who are responding to the call of Jesus on their lives to minister, who basically are hungry and thirsty for actual training. And our calling has always been to try to bring the resources of biblical studies, theology to people that don't have access. And that's why we call our training program the People's Seminary. And most of the people we serve are people that already feel called and are doing that kind of work, and they're funding it themselves through being farmers. We have one guy that has 200 chickens that he raises inside his house. He's the bishop, and he's founded like 13 churches in Zambia. And these are people that are just hardcore, like active pastoral agents who have the heart, but often they don't know how to maybe read the Old Testament. They tend to read it in a way that is disconnected from Jesus, where they don't see, like a lot of what we do is teaching people how to read the Bible, read the Old Testament with Jesus as your rabbi, like reading it on the road to Emmaus, rather than just reading it as in its own setting by itself, and so that helps correct some of the confusions about God being violent, because in Jesus we see a God who only lets violence be done against himself on the cross, and who calls us to love our enemies. And so people are like, wow, that makes sense. And so a lot of what we do is we in the second module, we tackle what we call toxic texts, like texts that often are used to harm people, like the Sodom and Gomorrah story, or texts that are confusing, like the conquest of Jericho, or, the earth opening up and swallowing, the Korah, the family of Korah. And, so we're dealing with trying to help people read those stories with Jesus as sort of in a way, the victim himself, who is the victim, who shows us God's humble love as someone who's self-giving.
Right.
And then that would be an example of the kind of targeted teaching we do, but also we're dealing with prosperity gospel, bringing correction regarding that. Because a lot of people think that the way that you make it in life is through obeying all the rules, and then God's going to bless you. But then when they try to do it, it doesn't seem to make their economics improve that much. And so there's a lot of confusion. People don't have a theology of suffering, even though they're suffering terribly. Often they think it brings confusion because they think, well, God's not blessing me. Even though I'm trying to be righteous, I'm suffering.
Right.
But we talk about suffering as being just part of what it means to be a Jesus follower.
Well, we could go into a whole conversation about the prosperity gospel and what it has done. Well, you and Gracie are white pastors. I think this is so neat, that have served most of your lives among people who fit the BIPOC, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color category, right? So when you do interact with them, whether that's in the States or abroad, due to what's being espoused as, quote, Christian, from prosperity gospel to politics to all of those, and the policies that are also, in particular at this point in time, having a racist leader in our country and racist people in the administration, how do you get past those behaviors from people who claim they're Christians, act like that, have white shade of skin? How do you build trust in order to present the love of Jesus to people?
We have to directly counter the sort of the witness, the false witness in a way, that brings confusion to the name of Jesus. And it's so tragic and deeply grieves us to see the white evangelical churches, their support of Trump being, just kind of bearing a counter witness to the gospel. And we know this inside and out because we're from families that my family was like a Trump supporting family, and I'm very familiar with all that, the logic of it. And so we directly address that theology all the time because people are aware of it. Like, for instance, in the jails, most of our people, when we first meet them, I asked them about if they're praying, and they said, well, no, they don't feel like they can pray because they prayed in the past and then they didn't do what they said they were going to do when they got out of jail, when they were in trouble. They feel like they're hypocrites if they ask God for help and then don't follow through with what they promised when they were in crisis. And so I said, well, when do you think you could pray then? And he says, well, after I get out or do my sentence, if I have 5 years to go, and then when I get out, I stay clean and sober, and I go to a church and stop swearing, and I get my life together, start paying my child support, take care of my kids. And I said, okay, then when would you know that you could pray? And he says, well, when I do all that. Isn't that right? And I'm like, no. You can. God loves you the way you are right now. You don't have to do anything to qualify to pray, to cry out.
Right.
And they're like, really? And they don't even believe that. Like, I have to, And so it's like, it's so sad. But that's the impression that the American, the white establishment gives, that, you're not qualified unless you do everything legally. Like, so if you're here and you're undocumented, why don't you just do things legally and go to the consulate? And, we're against people that come here illegally. And most Americans have no clue what it takes to come to the United States, and how, if you're a poor person, there's no chance that you're ever going to be allowed in. And most of the people we work with come here out of desperation. They're not coming here because, and they can't come here legally.
Right. That's the problem.
And they're not criminals in the sense that they're not committing crimes. They're working hard in the fields. They're working in fish processing plants, doing all the menial labor that most U.S. citizens would never do.
You on a recent blog, you wrote this. I'm going to read it. When we have little to no direct proximity to people suffering injustices, immigrants, the homeless, the incarcerated, the addicted, and the poor, it is much harder to discern the veracity of news reports about these people. Out of ignorance, many people approve of horrific injustices and blind allegiance to their authority sources. And I think that's what we're looking at right now with what's been happening with ICE, of course. And, I think about immigration. I don't know about you, but my family and my husband's family, our grandfathers and grandmothers all came from other countries and were immigrants to this country. And they came legally. But our country constantly needs hard workers. And the fact, I think we can all agree that our immigration system is broken and that our Congress has failed the American people in this area for decades. So we definitely need a streamlined path for immigrants who want to work, a guest worker program that we need, because we need immigrants. But just because those immigrants enter the country illegally does not justify the use of intimidation and death squads, right? And because of our Judeo-Christian system of law and justice here in America that is based on the Old and New Testament law, we're taught from childhood, most of us, some of us seem to have missed this, I guess, but that it's how we deal with those problems in the face of difficulties that separates us from the despots and tyrants who hold absolute power in these other countries. So I guess I want to ask, is peaceful protest in standing against the illegal and evil action by our government something that people of faith can honestly engage in?
I think it's critical for people of faith to completely break with the current administration and disassociate their faith from any kind of endorsement. We have to do the opposite of endorse. We have to say this administration is a counter witness. It's an antichrist witness, and we need to demonstrate that. It can't just be with words. It needs to be with acts of solidarity and protest. And I believe in nonviolent resistance, but I think also just speaking the truth and exposing the lies that are being spoken. And there's just a barrage of lies that a lot of people are feeding on through Fox News and through so much of the right-wing news media. But any news media is inadequate as a source of information. People need proximity to people on the margins so they can hear from people directly. And I was just out yesterday visiting all these families who are just terrorized right now. A lot of them are afraid to leave their homes. And they have U.S. citizen kids, but maybe the adults are undocumented and they can't take their kids with them to the park or to get ice cream or to go to the store or do anything because they're afraid that ICE will be there to take them away, and then their kids will be without their parents. And so they're having to tell their kids no to everything their kids want to do. And they're just living in extreme anxiety and fear.
We have friends in Tucson that's the same story, and the mom and dad have ulcers. It's just that, and my husband and I have just said, when we have people that say, well, that it's no different, that no, we're not, our law enforcement isn't targeting these people. And I'm going, when's the last time that you were pulled over as a white person by a policeman and ordered out of the car immediately, even if you were speeding? I mean, they give you the benefit of the doubt. The driving while brown as being a crime is clear. And so it's, but it's interesting. A Washington Post article this week said this: mounting evidence that independents and some Republicans are increasingly uncomfortable with the tactics of immigration and customs enforcement. Polls released over the last week have shown that growing numbers of Republicans, now up to around 30%, think ICE tactics or efforts have gone too far. So, I think people are starting to get the picture. And the deaths in Minneapolis really brought that to home. It's like it took some American citizens being shot by people, kind of rabid agents just sent out to terrorize, basically, for people to go, that really doesn't seem right. And I think this all goes back to this Christian nationalism and the partisan politics. And there's so much we could talk about, Bob. Gosh, we should have a couple of podcasts, but the idea of, I just think about this with what happened in Germany and Mein Kampf and the Third Reich, I just feel like it's on repeat. And I don't understand why so many people don't get it, except for the only thing I can think is that they don't know history. They don't understand that there were German Christians who went along kind of like the Pied Piper was leading them along this little path until it was almost too late, to jump. And of course, we know from all the Christians who were also put into the death camps and murdered in the Hitler regime, that there were people, brave people, who stood up, Corrie ten Boom and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his family and those. So do you think that that I don't know, that what it will take to awaken Americans to this?
Well, I would like to see people of faith who call themselves Jesus followers take their baptismal death and rebirth to a newness of life, like way, way, way more seriously. Like, if we're born not of the flesh, not of the blood, but we're born from above, from the Spirit, and we talk about being born again, why don't we live as if we have a new identity as children of God, instead of letting our national identity and our racial ethnic identity, just be our primary identity? And it seems like an obvious thing. God so loved the world that he sent his beloved Son, not just America. And so a MAGA agenda is completely anathema to a Jesus agenda, a Jesus and Kingdom of God agenda. We're not about making our one little nation, which is a big nation, but we're not about making our nation great as if it ever was great. Our nation was founded on slavery and on the dispossession of the lands of Native peoples. And for us to just go back and, remake our history as if we're like these saints, that just came here and we founded our country as a Christian nation. I mean, it was founded by Masons more as a deist sort of project and not as a Christian nation. So we need to know who we are and face our own selves and our pasts and the crimes that we've committed, and the innocent blood that's been shed on our land. We need to grieve that and act out of a new identity as daughters and sons of God. And, Jesus, Paul writes about this all the time, like in Hebrews, Abraham was someone who wasn't thinking of the country from when he went out, but he was thinking, he was desiring a better country, a heavenly country. And I think we have to choose. Are we going to have an entitled mindset thinking I'm a citizen, or are we going to embrace our stranger and alien status? You can't have it both ways. You can't maintain your citizenship as your primary identity. You have to make a choice. Are you going to be part of Jesus's kingdom, or are you going to stay stuck in Egypt? And one of the major calls of the scriptures is leave, depart, go out. Revelation 18, go out of Babylon. And that's what American Christians and Christians from any nation, we need to do. We need to embrace our stranger and alien status. And if we're aliens, then all of us are on equal footing with any alien. And I just want to read two scriptures. Exodus 23. You shall not oppress a foreigner, since you yourselves know the feelings of a foreigner. For you also were foreigners in the land of Egypt. So we should know that we're foreigners in the United States, even if we're citizens.
Exactly.
And then it says, here's Leviticus 19:34. The foreigner who lives with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love them as yourselves. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Isn't that sort of a major indictment against the whole MAGA sort of immigration policy that ICE is enforcing?
Well, the whiteness, the white supremacy, the Germanic idea of this is, I just think about it. Am I correct? There's about 2,000 references to the poor and the needy and the stranger and the alien in the Bible. Is it like 2,000? That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That is a lot. And so I think, again, what I see, and I'm guilty of this too. our lives as American Christians and Western Christians have become so soft and easy in general that we've hunkered down, and this is where we want to stay. And so I think there is this tension between thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Yes, instead of taking it to be your will be done, your kingdom come, so we can sit here and prosper and build, our empires, that's a total misunderstanding to me of what the kingdom of God is. The kingdom of God was not like the prosperity gospel and all of that. And I think it's hard. I think that your work and your ministry on the margins and the experience that you had and your comment about if we are close to people who are in need, it really causes you to look and say, do I really need that new pair of shoes? Do I really need, and the perspective changes, and it causes us, I think, to look more and realize that what I've been given is so much, and to look for like the gift of need. I feel this is part of why I wrote the book and have the podcast, is that taking somebody else's needs, when they call out for help, if I have time, talent, or my treasure, my money that I can do to help fulfill that need or meet that need, even if it's in a small way, then their need is met. And my need to be a person who offers love and kindness to somebody else is also met. And in that, we all are fulfilled and receive a measure of joy, right? I mean, it's a give.
I mean, I agree. And yet I also think that our actually stepping into relationship with people is even more valuable than what we can materially give. Like, we've had an outreach to the streets, and we have a huge epidemic of fentanyl use on our streets. Before that, it was heroin and meth primarily. And we've been going out every Friday, and we've done it for a number of years. And we have we've lost so many people. We have a wall in our church, a memorial wall with over 130 faces on it of people we know who we've lost to overdose. And we do a lot of memorials for young people who mostly are young people who die. And it's just so heartbreaking because these folks, we need to reach them. And in stepping into relationship with them and giving them time and showing respect and honor to them. And like we would offer socks, warm blankets, hot drinks, and just conversation, but just actually honoring them with a respectful presence and maybe even an offer to pray with them if they'd like that. Like now we have all these folks that are coming to our church that we met on the streets who were fully, we were expecting to hear that they'd overdosed, and some of them have overdosed 15, 20 times, and they were brought back with Narcan, brought back from death. And now they're coming and they're in recovery. And we need to find ways to reach folks and get them on that track of recovery. But a lot of it has to do with them feeling honored and respected and loved so that they have hope.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many guests I've had on the podcast that keep saying that change comes through relationships. It's like you said, yes, we can give them clean needles and we can give people food, but we can help in physical ways, of course, but it's the relationships that give people the hope and the value as a human being that says you're worth my time and my interest. Well, Bob, we've got to bring it to a close. And I so appreciate and respect what you and Gracie have put your hands to for all these decades. And I know the people that are the recipients of your ministry and service and love, whether it's here in the States or abroad, are appreciative of you taking the time. And it'll only be when all is said and done that we can actually know, that yes, this act of kindness, this relationship actually did bring fruit for the person. So I thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for all that you do in your writing and your podcasts, you and John, and God bless you. And bless all of you out there who are listening that, I just pray that God would help you find your own personal callings, and that you would be able to step into that abundant life, which is an offer for all of us to participate in.
Yes. That's clearly you are energized by a supernatural spirit. So folks, again, our need for compassion, to remember the people on the margins, to look for ways to know them, to hear their stories is so important. And even if it's just one person, even if you take the time out of a working schedule and family and kids, it's worth it. You can check out Bob's work and ministry by going to bobekblad.com and peoplesseminary.org, and those links will be in the show notes. The great music you're hearing was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda of Kubanda Music. You can find him on any streaming service. The engineer is Ray Engineering of 3rd Street Productions in Tucson, Arizona. And please consider following and rating and sharing this podcast, and subscribing to my free Substack newsletter, where I have articles and interviews with all sorts of wonderful people. So leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear from you. Bye.